I'm going to go ahead and get started. We have an hour. We have a lot to get through with you two ladies. I'm going to introduce myself for those who don't know me, and I think it may only be Carla. My name is Latanya Brooks. I am the newly appointed Wellness Initiative Leader for Act Enough, a local nonprofit. I also have an up and coming health coaching business called Abundant Roots. Um, in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month, we decided to do a conversation, just have a relaxed conversation, kind of open chat about um, emotional eating. During Mental Health Awareness Month, I feel like there's always a lot of like, take care of your mental health and removing the stigma type conversations. But I don't think there's a lot of conversation about how it affects other parts of our lives.
Mhm.
And as someone who's passionate about the health and wellness space, the part that we overlook a lot is, people aren't just greedy a lot of times. There's something deeper that is happening that's causing them to overeat. So we have two ladies that's going to speak with us today. One is going to share her personal story about emotional eating, and that's Miss Elaine Crocker. And she's the president of Yet Stand, a local nonprofit that deals with mental health. And she's a playwright.
Mhm.
And then we have Christina Hampton, who is going to give us some insights on the professional side. She's a mental health professional, so she's going to talk about the professional side of emotional eating and give us some tips on how to manage it, things of that nature. I'm going to start with some statistics. Approximately 73% of the US population is either overweight or obese. And this was shocking to me. Up to 60% of them report that they emotionally eat. That's a huge percentage.
Yeah.
Um, Women, of course, it's always us. I feel like we get everything the most. We are more likely to be emotional eaters. We eat in response to negative emotions like sadness or stress, and we tend to eat unhealthy foods or just overeat in general when we're feeling that way. Um, then we have to think about the health implications that it has on us. So it increases our BMI, which increases our chances for diabetes, high blood pressure, which then increases our chances for stroke and
Mhm.
kidney failure. So it's a domino effect.
Yeah.
Also, people who are emotional eaters, even when they try to do weight loss programs and, okay, I'm going to get serious, I'm going to start tracking my eating, I'm going to start exercising, they still struggle. They don't get favorable outcomes in that area because there's an emotional eating component that they haven't addressed yet.
Because you're treating the symptom, not the actual underlying issue.
Correct. Correct. And a lot of times you haven't even made the connection.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to start with Elaine. We're just going to let you tell your story a little bit, and then we'll let Christina wrap it up with the facts and the professional advice and how we can do better in this area of our lives or even encourage others. So, Miss Elaine.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. Yeah, looking forward to having this conversation. You all can hear me okay?
Yeah, I have a few questions for you, and then you can, of course, go on and add whatever you'd like to add. I do want to say when me and Elaine met, probably, I guess it's been about a month or so ago, and we talked about like the wellness initiative and my passion for health and wellness. She was an open book. She immediately shared that she felt her issue was eating emotionally because there's some trauma. And it was, you know, for her to recognize it was refreshing because not many people will even, and even I think if they recognize it, not many people will share it, especially with someone they just met. So she was very vulnerable and very open immediately. And when we discussed having this conversation, she immediately raised her hand to say, I'll share my story. Um, so thank you again, Elaine. And then my first question for you, and then again you can share away, is when did you realize that emotional eating was actually something you were dealing with?
Gosh, when did I realize it? Probably, let's see, it would have been after my son was born. and he is 31 years old now. He was probably, um, he was maybe elementary school, maybe middle school, when I figured that out and figured it out with the help of a therapist.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, she was taking me through, and Christina will talk about it more, but she was taking me through CBT, which is a cognitive behavioral therapy. And a big part of that is, recognizing what's going on, with you, and then um, how to use positive tools and thoughts and that kind of thing to, you know, sort of, help with with whatever the issues might be.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, what type of emotions what type of emotions typically triggered you? Like were you bored sometimes? Was it stress? Was it loneliness?
Yeah, for me, it's boredom, definitely. Really anything. I mean, it could be negative emotions, but it can also be, good emotions. So the negative being boredom, loneliness, sometimes triggers, triggering thoughts, triggering emotions, and that might come up a lot. Maybe I could be looking at something on TV even and be triggered back to some traumatic experiences in my life, and the next thing I know, next thing I know, I'm eating. And then, of course, the positive side, I mean, everybody pretty much celebrates by eating. And so that's just kind of almost normal that, a celebration is going to include food. And so I can be feeling good and happy and you know. But the problem is that I will go overboard. And I think that now today it's a little more habitual. And so it's like it's a habit that I have to, constantly work on, to break. And I will say that over the years, I mean, I've come a long way. And a big part of it is awareness. Like they say, knowledge is power. And so having that awareness has helped me a lot. So I can tell myself in a moment, you're not hungry. You're just maybe you're feeling this or that. You're not hungry. Maybe go drink some water or, do something else, right? Something positive or think positive, that kind of thing. Um, but when I didn't have the awareness, then I was just in it and I was just doing it. And, I didn't know why. I didn't know how to stop. I didn't, and so that's big for me is at least being aware,
Yeah.
that whatever the issue might be, whether it's the emotional overeating or whatever it is having that awareness, because once you know, like they say, better, you can do better. Yeah. So I mean, I've really come a long way. I mean, I used to be upwards of, oh gosh, I was probably in the 300s, pounds and that kind of thing. And so I've definitely have come a long way and still a work in progress.
That's amazing. Yeah. Congratulations to you. Um, so you mentioned the therapy being what made you recognize it in therapy has helped. Were there any other practices? And I don't know what your therapist recommended, but were there any type of spiritual practices or support groups within like a community that you leaned on also, or was it just the therapy?
Yeah, for me, it was both. I always say hashtag God in therapy. So, I am a Christian, I believe in God. And so, having the scriptures and knowing, really how I was created, what I was created for, how God feels about me. And that what he wants for me is to thrive, flourish, and prosper in all areas of life. That's internally, that's externally, and in every way. And so that helps a lot to be able to kind of pull on scripture just or in a moment when I'm having a moment and I'm feeling that weakness to be able to pray, for sure. And and also just kind of, being able to say really positive, things to myself, or knowing that, okay, yeah, you're not hungry. And like I said, I can tell, go have some water, or maybe you need to call and talk to somebody, or, you know, do something else, or think, just change your thinking right now, because you're just not, you're not in thinking right,
Okay.
but yeah, definitely the spirituality, helps me a lot. And I think that's part of how I came to realize what was that something was wrong or was going on. Because as I read scripture and I read about how God feels about us, I realize that how I'm feeling about myself and how I'm treating myself is totally opposite to what God wants and how he feels about me. And so it's keeping that in mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Did you ever feel any shame or guilt when you were going through the emotional eating or times you caught yourself emotion? Was there any shame or guilt that would come up? And if so, how did you deal with that?
It was definitely when I was younger, a lot of shame. And a lot of that was because, I mean, this eating that started for me. I was very young when it started. I mean, I wasn't even a teenager yet, so I was very young. And so, the family, the friends, the schoolmates, always has something to say, of course, that, not very nice, right? Um, and it was something too that I kind of did, not kind of did, that I did in secret. And that part of that was the shame, because I didn't see other people eating that way. And so I had to hide, that I was eating that way. And unfortunately, because definitely back when I was a child, there were no conversations like this. And I didn't have access to information. I didn't have access to tools, to skills, there was just nothing. And so the shame came in not only because of the weight that I would eat, but of course, eating that way puts on weight, you know. And so as the weight, would pile on, and the more negative, comments, and name calling and things like that would happen. And just being sort of the one amongst the friends that, was the biggest one, And so all of that brought on shame. So when I was younger, I didn't know how to deal with it. I really didn't know how to deal with it, so I would cry in private, and, I would beat myself up, all the things that people were saying about me, I would say about myself. And so that was a tape that just played over and over in my head, and I didn't cope well at all, which was probably part of why I, went down this really negative and self-destructive path that I went down when I was younger. Um, and today, it's more, I don't know that I won't say necessarily shame, but it's just more today, just knowing that I have progressed, that I am doing better, that I can do better, and that helps me today with, any kind of negative thoughts, or any shame, or guilt and things like that. Is to being able to, a big part of it definitely is being able to look back and see how far I've come. And that helps me a lot.
Yeah. I always say progress over perfection, right?
Yeah, for
And
sure, for sure. Yeah.
recognize your progress.
Yeah, it's important.
Do you feel like it affected other areas of your life, like relationships or your physical health? You kind of touched it in a little bit, but do you want to give more context into how whether it was the way you were feeling about yourself? Sometimes we push people away because we don't feel good about
hmm
ourselves, anything of that nature. Did you
hmm
feel any of that?
Yeah, I was more that was more of it for me is that I because of the way that I
Oh
thought
no, are you
of
finished?
myself that I
Are
would
you finished? Yeah, I got it. I know. Yeah.
that I would yeah, I would push people
I said,
away. I would not go maybe to certain um events. Um I had friends that if they were when I was younger, if they were going out, let's say they were going to a party or maybe to a club or something like that, I wouldn't go because they were smaller and I felt like they were going to get all the attention. So I wouldn't put myself in that, position. And I always thought that people had the same thoughts about me that I had about myself. I found that was not always true, but I would project. So whatever negatives that I was feeling about myself, I projected on others. And so I'm feeling this way about me and thinking this way about me, so they must be too. And
Yeah.
so that was part of the pushing, pushing people away. Um, and in terms of my health, I don't know, God has been good and has just has just really, been keeping me. He really has in terms of my health. I know that I could probably be in a, real pickle, health wise. So he's just really been keeping me. So it's probably for me, it's probably more like I get, the aches, different aches and, the back and the knees and different things like that. And when I'm standing and the weight, those kinds of things. But no really, thank God, no real serious, medical conditions.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just out of curiosity, your family. So you said, when you're younger, always being the bigger one out of the group. How do you, how did your family members, did anyone recognize that there may be something going on there, or would they just think you were greedy, overeating?
Yeah. It was more the the greedy, the overeating, getting the what is that, just push the plate away or however that's saying, there's some kind of saying, or just stop. You know, it was that kind of thing. And I will say that I mean they thought that something was wrong, but not they didn't understand the psychology of it. And so it was just what I was do like my behavior was wrong and was bad and was, and like you said, you're just greedy and you're a glutton and all that kind of stuff, and just that whole thing of, just stop. And they really didn't understand that I couldn't just stop,
Yeah.
and like I said, there was no help, there was no resources, no tools, no nothing. And so I really went many, many years where I could not stop. I didn't know how, I didn't know how, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't connect all the dots like to my trauma and all those things. And so, I just suffered through it and suffered through all the comments and, all of that. My mother started me on diets when I was probably 12 or 13.
Hmm.
And it put me so I'd be on different diets. I, ate cottage cheese and fruit all day, or the counting the calories and whatever, taking me to the doctor and then the doctor, putting me on diets. And so that started, like I said, 12 or 13 years old. And I think you alluded to it earlier where there would be some success, but then, you know I would go right back to, to the overeating. And again, no one making any kind of connection, like what is happening? Why is this happening? You know? Yeah.
Well, cottage cheese to a 12-year-old should be considered child abuse, in my opinion. But and it, I think it's the most disgusting thing ever.
Well, what is interesting though is that I still like cottage cheese and fruit.
Gosh, my
Yeah,
mom used to eat it.
I still like cottage cheese and fruit, and I eat it every now and then, But yeah, nothing like that. Like I said, it was breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, you know, cottage cheese and fruit, you know. Yeah.
Oh, God bless you. Yeah, I've tried. We'll talk about benefits to protein. I struggle with it. Just
Yeah. Yeah.
texture. Um, what would you say was the hardest part, if you're thinking back, of navigating all that for you? And it could be when you were younger or as it was brought to your attention more and your therapist made the connection for you. What was the
Hmm.
hardest part
I
navigating?
think, yeah, I think really the hardest part is that um is was and is that it is something that I have to constantly work on. That to constantly be, that sometimes it's like, I just want to kind of be like, I don't know what I guess I think, everybody else is like they don't have to think about what they're eating, how they eat, how, like every minute all day kind of, and struggle with the lose weight here and then the eating and then the weight's back on and all, that whole juggling. And so I think that's the hardest part is that is that I mean, I've had to just accept, right, that this is something that I have to work on and I have to work on it continuously. And it's just what it is. I have to work on it continuously. But sometimes, yeah, that's aggravating to me. It's frustrating to me.
Well, as I mentioned, you heard those statistics earlier. So 73 and 60% of those 73 struggle with it. So you're definitely not alone in this.
Yeah,
They're not
yeah.
alone.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it too was because I do realize that now that I am not alone in it. Even though sometimes I'll tell myself that I am, but I realize that I'm not alone in it. And what I realize is that, like me, I would say maybe most, I don't know, don't really know why they don't know why they have that issue. They don't know why they overeat. Like they haven't made connections and haven't been able to, get information, whether it's through therapy or whatever it is, to start connecting dots to try to understand like how it started, where it came from, and then okay, now you have that information. Okay, now here's some things you can do. I think a lot of people don't are not there yet.
Yeah. Okay. I have one last question for you. What would you tell someone who's struggling with emotional eating and they're feeling ashamed or like stuck? What would your advice to them?
Um, somebody told me a long time ago, they said something to me, and this was, and so I would say I would say I have somewhat of an addictive personality.
Okay.
And so I say that because I went through struggling with drug addiction as well. And when I was in recovery, somebody says something to me, and basically said, it's like you have an illness, but you can get better. And I think that's what I would want to say to somebody like you don't beat yourself. We don't beat ourselves up if we have a cold or if we have, I don't know, some sort of disease or we don't beat ourselves up. We get help and you go through whatever processes you have to go through for healing and it's the same with that. So just kind of remove the stigma and just understand that it is a condition. It's a health condition, but it's also a mental health in a lot of ways. And so just to be gentle with yourself and just keep at it, keep working on it. You fall short today, okay, you get up, go again tomorrow, you know what I mean, and just kind of and just keep at it. um yeah, that would kind of be the advice I would give anyone.
Awesome. Thank you. I think that's still, I know there's a lot of awareness way more today than it was when you were younger, of course. But I think the biggest struggle is still getting people to see that, if I cut my arm, everyone says, or if I break my arm, she broke her arm instead of cast, she's hurt. But we can't see what's going on with people when they're dealing with mental health issues, and we dismiss it so easily.
Yeah.
Um, we throw words at it that we don't even understand,
Hmm.
or we just call it crazy or something's wrong with them, and it's so much deeper.
Yeah.
And again, it's getting a lot of awareness, but I think people still just are so nonchalant about like just dismissing what is happening to people mentally and how serious it is. How
Yeah,
serious it is.
for sure, for sure. Yeah.
So thank you so much, Elaine. I appreciate you sharing with us. We'll come back to you towards the end for one more thing. We're
Okay.
going to move on to Miss Christina and just get some professional input here and some advice from her. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Latanya, for having me. I appreciate you. One thing I did want to say when you guys are talking about how we kind of like try to brush it off to the side. Mental health is definitely something we all deal with on a daily basis. Like people feel like, oh, if I'm going to a therapist, that means I have a mental health problem, right? But in reality, every day we get up, we have a mental health, something going on with our mental health, right? Every day. Whether that's you get up in the morning, kids are acting up. Now you got to try to keep your sanity, right? Your husband's not helping you get the kids together for school that day. You got to keep your sanity, right? Um, you're telling your kids to get dressed. They don't want to get dressed. You got to keep your sanity. They don't want to get on the bus. These are all things that challenge our mentality on a daily basis, right? So I just wanted to say that because we think about mental health and we think it's like in this little category, but it's an everyday thing for every person.
And probably even worse with the current climate we're in. Like there's so much, you know,
Yes, yes,
constant bad news and worse news and constant
yes.
stimulation. Yeah, I'm
Every
sure
day,
it's
all day. If you're
yeah.
on social media, I'm on social media every day, all day. I see it.
Mhm. Yeah.
So,
And sometimes you need to get off because of that. Yeah. Take breaks. But thank you for being here, Christina. So I want to start with you. We've been talking about this emotional eating, had a full conversation with Elaine, but can you just define it for us? Like, what exactly is emotional eating and how does it differ from being physically hungry?
okay. So emotional eating, that's coping with emotions, right? Rather than to satisfy your physical hunger. You're actually coping with whether it's stress, it's sadness, or boredom, or even happiness. Elaine talked about being happy and having emotional eating, right? And that's I think that's one of the other questions, but it is definitely uh when we hear emotional eating, we automatically go to a negative thought. But you can be very happy and emotionally eat. Physical hunger, that is your body, physical hunger builds gradually, right? It's not something that you get an emotion and want to eat. And you want to eat because your body is craving food, right? It needs the fuel in order to function. So emotional hunger is triggered by feelings, physical hunger is not.
Thank you. Um, Definitely eat when we're happy. We actually cater to that. We celebrate and we go eat. It's
It's It's
yeah.
graduation season. What is everybody doing? The restaurants. Mother's Day was just the other day. Everybody's at my mom didn't want to go out because of it.
Yeah.
So everybody's out, celebrating and eating. Food is something that is a part of everybody's culture. We like,
Mhm.
we throw big festivals and big parties that are just surrounded with food, right? So
Yeah. Why do you think so many people turn to food for comfort at times where they may be feeling lonely or bored or stressed? Why do you think food is the one thing that they turn to?
well, I mean, look at the word comfort food. We talk about comfort food all the time, right? And those are usually the foods that have the high fats, high sugar. Those are the foods that make us feel the most comfortable, right? Those are the foods that give us pleasure. It sends off dopamine in our body, right? It makes us feel like we have some form of relief because we're sitting around and eating these types of food, which is high fat and high sugar. Think about what always comes to mind when I think about emotional eating. We have made it almost, I don't want to say the word glamorous. We've kind of made it glamorous where we are watching movies and TV shows and the girl's going through heartbreak. She got the pizza, the fried chicken, the big gallon of ice cream, and she's just sitting there crying and eating out of the ice cream. And we all see that and we're like, oh, laughing about it, and most of the time it's made as like almost a joke, right? And we wonder why we have high obesity in America. It's because of things like that. When we glorify things, we glorify food. So I
Okay.
think that's why, it gives people a sense of comfort. That's why it's called comfort food.
Yeah, for me,
Plus,
definitely. I mean, I remember when it started for me, and that's really what it was. It was those foods because they tasted at least to me, they tasted so good,
You're never going
and
to find
I needed
somebody,
to feel good, and so
you're not going to find
did that.
anybody going through stress and saying, let me go eat a salad. No,
Right?
nobody's going to do that. We're looking for the best tasting things. Okay. We're not
Yeah,
going to look for a glass of water. We're going, where's a Coke, a Sprite, something.
yeah, true. Hmm.
Well, if you're a chocolate eater for comfort, do
Chocolate
dark
eater.
chocolate.
Yep.
Dark
Yep.
chocolate, then it's all good. Just don't eat the whole bar. But if you go for dark chocolate, that'll change your dopamine and
Well,
everything.
and that's the issue. If you're emotionally eating, you're probably going to eat that whole bar and maybe another bar right along with it,
Exactly,
right?
exactly, exactly. See, that's the thing. That's the thing that people don't. Yeah, I can eat something that might be considered healthier, right?
Yeah.
But I'm gonna eat too much of it
Overeat it.
because
And
of
it's not,
the psychology and emotional stuff that's going on. Yeah.
yeah, it's not doing, it's not you're not doing portion control, right?
Yeah.
You're just whatever you're going through at that time,
Yeah.
your mind is telling you. You talked about CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. That's about changing the mind.
Yeah.
And the only way to change behaviors is changing the
Changing
mind,
mind.
right?
Yeah.
We talk about mindset so much.
Yeah.
So that's what cognitive behavioral therapy is. How you
Yeah.
going I feel like it's almost psyching your mind out a little bit, right? But psyching it
Mhm.
out into a positive way instead of a negative way.
Yeah.
Is there ever a time where you would consider emotional eating as being normal?
Yeah, we just talked about celebratory times, right? The only time emotional eating is not normal is when you're doing it to cope with stress. If you're coping with stress, you're coping with boredom, that's the only time that is not considered a norm. But if you're emotionally eating as far as being happy and going out with your family, having a birthday dinner or graduation dinner or, anniversary dinner, that's considered, a happy time and a great way to have emotional eating. Now, the opposite of that, we all know, is eating those two, three, four, five dark chocolate candy bars
Mhm.
after we just got some bad news that our boyfriend was with somebody else or whatever it may be, right? So I think there's always a time where emotional eating can be positive, and that's when you're not using it as a way to cope with your life stressors.
So to piggyback on that, when because we also tend to overeat in those settings, is that emotionally tied also, but tied to the happy feelings?
That might be where we say greedy.
Okay.
We might be greedy at
Okay.
that point
There's
because you know
Mhm. Yeah, I would
because
agree. Yeah.
I have been around where, some people may eat a little bit more than and I say that in a lighthearted, joking way, but there could be a situation where there is an underlying issue and this person has found the opportunity to now sit and overeat, right? But there are times, I mean, I've had times where I've eaten a little bit more than I should have. I didn't feel guilty or shame about it. I just ate. And at that point, I could probably say, yeah, I was being a little greedy at that time, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, I just think that, you never know, right? You never know unless you know the person personally and you
Mhm.
know that they are going through maybe a stressor in their life and they're out with you having dinner and you see that they just keep eating, then, maybe that could be a concern.
Yeah.
Okay. And so Elaine talked about her starting in childhood, and she mentioned having some trauma. How does unresolved trauma or childhood experiences affect our relationship with food?
Well, definitely, I mean, it could cause us, to create patterns, right? I think in some cases with trauma, we use food to, again, it gives us pleasure, right? In some cases, some kids may even are, let's say food is their reward. Like I've worked in as a behavioral support clinician, right? And a lot of times, what we use for kids to get them to behave properly was food. They were motivated by food,
Yeah.
Mhm.
right? You see this also when we're training dogs, right?
Mhm.
They are motivated by food. So as they become adults, that may cause the problem then because they've been for so many years of their life. the motivation was, if I do what I'm supposed to do, I can eat whatever I want at that time, right? So now they're an adult and they can buy the food, they can eat whatever they want. They don't have any limits. And in some cases too, where children have dealt with trauma and stress, they feel like they have lost control. They had no control, right? So now the food is the one thing they can control.
Mm,
Yeah.
that's interesting because I know that happens in a lot of areas where if I can't control things over here, I'm going to control it where I can control it. And so whatever that looks like, as long as I'm in control, I feel better about it.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
you see that a lot in the workplace too, where it may not be food, it may be a boss that has no control at home, but they come to work
Right.
and they control everybody and they become a tyrant.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, and speaking about the control part of it, um, and I did speak of trauma earlier. I didn't speak of the specific trauma. So it was for me, it was having different episodes of sexual assault as a child. And there is and I heard this years ago from a counselor who said that sometimes what trauma, especially with that kind of trauma, that had to do with your body, we
Mm-hmm.
think in our heads that that has to do with my body. This trauma happened because of my body. And so my control is going to be I'll eat and I'll put on weight. And so now I don't have to worry about anybody
Yeah.
wanting my body because
Yeah.
and I mean again that I mean it's so this the
Still a
psychology is so deep,
psychological thing.
you
Yeah.
know. But yeah, that was and so that was in a way kind of a control. It kind of in my mind, kept me safe, kept me from being hurt, kept me from being touched inappropriately, those kinds of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. What role does like hormones and brain chemicals have on this, Christina?
So we talked about earlier dopamine, right? So when we're stressed out, the body releases cortisol. Cortisol is what causes us to have increased appetite and cravings, right? Then what we're going to have after we get those appetites increased and those cravings for those chips and that ice cream and that pizza and that fried chicken and the soda and all the good stuff that makes us feel good at the time we're going through stress, it now releases serotonin and dopamine, and it tells us we're feeling good, right? We're feeling good. So those chemicals play a huge role. Cortisol, dopamine, and serotonin. Dopamine and serotonin are the feel goods.
Mhm.
Cortisol is what is released when you're stressed.
And Christina, isn't there something I mean, I've done some research on it. I can't, you know, kind of relay it all that way, but something happens like when people that have endured trauma,
Mm-hmm.
especially kind of repeated, something happens to those parts of something happens to the serotonin, something happens to the dopamine, something um right? It like decreases,
I would believe so. I think the
yeah,
body will probably produce more cortisol
yeah,
than dopamine or serotonin, probably because, I mean, maybe they're at a war with each other because you've endured so much trauma. But
yeah,
don't quote me on that because I'm
yeah.
not like, a scientist or
Yeah, yeah, but I do know, yeah, just, but there is something to that when it comes to
I can
trauma.
imagine
Yeah, yeah,
that will happen.
yeah.
It would make sense because it would also activate what's called the sympathetic nervous system, which is the
Hmm.
fight or flight, and the so you're
Hmm.
constantly elevated, and because it's been trauma, you don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah,
So
You're in survival mode.
yeah.
right,
Yeah.
so I can definitely see it being related and throwing those levels off.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Are there any signs that someone should look for that could kind of show them that, because again, you said we eat when we're happy, and that's normal because hey, we're
Hmm.
celebrating Mother's Day, or maybe I'm a little sad one day and you know, um, you know what, I'm gonna have some ice cream, and I do it every blue moon. But when do we start to recognize that it might be becoming a problem, like it's harmful or it's becoming a disorder for us?
Well, one of the things I did write down that Elaine mentioned was shame and guilt.
Mhm.
That's one indication that emotional eating is happening, right? Not being physically hungry and still eating,
Yeah.
um, using food to cope with your emotions.
Mhm.
Let's say you're sad, like you said, you're sad, and usually, I heard you say every blue moon. Usually, when people emotionally eat, if they're sad, and let's say they already have some form of mental health concern, like depressive mood or something like that, they're probably always eating, right? And overeating. So paying attention to those things, like, how often they're eating these things. If you're eating a pint of ice cream every day, then you probably should be asking some questions,
Yeah.
right? Um, Eating in secret or feeling out of control while eating,
Mhm.
right? Not being able to stop yourself. I think Elaine said something like, people may say, why can I stop doing this? Right? That's another sign. Frequently turning to food during stress, sadness, and boredom.
Yeah.
Okay. So those are some ways to be able to, recognize, okay, something is going on. And this is not just to look at someone else and see this, right? Sometimes we got to look at ourselves too. Like, am I doing these? Do I have these characteristics? And uh, figure out what your triggers are, right?
Right, right. So to piggyback on that, so if you're starting to notice that you're doing it,
Mhm.
what would you suggest that are some healthy habits you could do? So instead of I'm feeling stressed, instead of going to get the ice cream, what should I do instead?
So first, also Elaine mentioned awareness, right? We can't fix something if we're not aware that it's a problem. So the first thing we need to do is have awareness. Once we have that awareness, we need to identify what are our emotional triggers, right? For some people, I talk about triggers a lot with clients, and I find that it is hard for them sometimes to recognize what their triggers are until we start talking. And they're like, well, and then my mom came in and I just lost it. Okay, sounds like mama is a trigger.
Mhm.
So just being mindful of the things that are happening in your life every day that are triggering you to want to emotionally eat, right? Those are triggers for you. If your boss says gives you an extra assignment every day, right at 4 o'clock when he knows you're leaving at 4:30, that's a trigger. That's a trigger, right? Um, Eating balanced meals to keep your blood sugar stable. We talked about diabetes and high blood pressure. So eating things that are going to keep your body stable, keep your moods, because we all know that if we don't eat, I do get hangry. So not eating can also make you, and that's another thing. There's um, stress can people everybody reacts to stress different. There's two different ends of the spectrum. There's the overeater and there's the undereater too. I'm one of those people that if I'm stressed out about something, I don't eat because I'm too focused on overthinking about what's stressing me out, right? So another healthy way is practicing mindfulness, right? Mindfulness meditation. I'm a Christian, so I'm very careful about what I use for meditation because some people use other things, but there are videos that I recommend to my clients. So I look at those videos myself, and it helps me to relax and clear my mind. Sometimes when you're stressed out, you need to take some time and pull back from whatever it is that's stressing you out, and kind of let your mind. It's hard to be completely empty in your mind, if that makes sense, but trying to find a way to not let anything distract you and just take a moment. Wake up in the morning, get up early, like put on your mindfulness meditation, listen to that person's voice and let them get you into a relaxed mood so that you can, start off your day intentionally the way that you want to start out, right? And that will also help you with your eating control. Getting enough sleep and exercise.
Mhm.
I want to say too, it did say eat balanced meals. Some of us should probably and when I say some of us, talking about me, should prepare our meals, right? Because also being tired and being hungry, you're gonna pick up the first thing that you see, and you might overeat at that time if you haven't eaten all day, right? Build a routine to reduce boredom and create structure. So find some healthy things to do, right? So you're not bored.
Yeah, and Christina, you raised a good point earlier. One of the first things you were saying was, I find that to no longer let it be a secret.
Yeah.
That's huge. Like talk about it.
Yeah.
If it's talking to your doctor, if it's talking to a therapist, if it's talking to your friend, if it's you have to talk about it. You
And
know,
that's that
that helps so
yeah.
much in taking away the secrecy of it and the shame of it and the more that you're
Well,
out there with it.
and the reason we have this secret and this shame is because society has created this,
Mhm.
right? They have created this that, if you're a certain weight, you don't look good. If you're a certain complexion, you don't look good. If your hair, I mean, I'm bald, and if you don't have flowing hair, you don't look good, right? So there are so many things that they tell us about ourselves, and it makes it very hard for someone, especially if you grow up in a household. And I just think about, my stepchildren who grew up with their grandmother, who is very uh not so kind when it comes to talking about weight.
Yeah.
So as you grow up in a household like that, you are scared to say, I can't stop eating. I really need some help, because now the person's teasing you, the
Mhm.
person's shaming you, making you feel like you're less of a person. So even if you have, emotional eating is a serious issue, but imagine a child who has emotional eating, being sexually molested, being bullied. Who are they going to go to?
Yeah.
Right. So I think it starts with, I wish something like these topics, and that was one thing I really want to get into, as far as these type of topics need to be in elementary school and up. We need to make sure that kids are able to talk about, if they feel like they're eating too much and they need help.
Yeah.
Right. We want them to be able to recognize the signs for themselves. And this is something that helps with their mental health, and helps them become productive people in life, right? And I just feel like sometimes our society is not aiming for that. Like, we want a bunch of people walking around just miserable and mentally unwell. And it's not to the benefit of everybody, right? In our society, but
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll share a little bit about the older generation and how they look at weight. As someone who was I guess I use the word pudgy child, I developed the nickname Miss Piggy. I have an aunt that still calls me that to this day.
Mm.
Um, and really thought not much of it. It was my nickname. I had a cousin who was light skinned, tall. She called her Big Bird. Never took it to heart, never thought it was a big deal. But as I got older and started going to therapy myself, I recognized before therapy that do have a form of body dysmorphia. Um,
mm,
Even after in my late 20s losing a lot of weight, I've kept my weight down all these years. I still would at times look in the mirror and see a 500-pound person. And now I was never 500
mm,
pounds. So why I think I'm that, I don't know. But I would look in the mirror and see this huge person, and it would take me sometimes seeing a picture to realize, oh, I'm really not that big.
mm,
Um, but I discovered that it stemmed from being called Miss Piggy as a little
Mhm.
girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, again, did my aunt mean to harm me? Did she think she was harming me? Of course not. But we
yeah,
don't realize just little things and little the stigmas we give kids, and we attach things to them,
Hmm.
and
it's true.
how it affects them throughout life. And some may never discover it. If I had never went to therapy, I probably would have never made the connection.
Exactly.
But I started realizing, like, why do you go through these moments where you see yourself completely different than what you are? And as we worked through it and talked about it, and made that connection. So
Yeah,
it's we definitely need to, being in the elementary school, I love that idea. Um,
yeah.
that
Let it
definitely,
start there.
yeah.
Yeah. I
I think
found,
Michelle Obama was doing something like that, where she was trying to implement, programs in elementary schools, well,
I
in
think
schools,
so.
period. And
Hmm.
so that kids could be more aware of, healthy eating. Have
Yeah.
you seen I did an internship at an elementary school for school counseling, and I would go in there, take the kids to lunch, and I'm like, this is what they're eating?
Yeah.
Hmm.
I
I
haven't
mean,
seen it in years, but
sugar.
I've seen it, and it's Yeah.
Yeah,
For
yeah,
breakfast, the amount of sugar for breakfast, and we wondering why this child that has ADHD is running around the school, and we all chasing him and calling on the walkie-talkie.
right.
Well, he had pounds of sugar this morning.
Yeah.
So it's things like that. It's like, let's be productive and not reactive, I guess.
Yeah, I think one of the things too with the older generation, a lot of times that they believed that the harshness, like to talk negatively about you or to call
Mhm.
you names, or that it wouldn't change you, that it would
Yeah,
make you stop.
yeah,
Again, not realizing that oftentimes will drive you deeper into, the negative behavior,
yeah. It's
harshness,
true.
the name
True.
calling, drives you deeper into it. Not, it doesn't always make you stop, you know.
And I tell my kids all the time, if you can deal with your grandmother, you can deal with anybody in this world. She has prepared you to deal with anybody in this world.
We're getting towards the end, so I do want to open it up to the other ladies on the call and see if anyone has any questions for Christina or Elaine, or if anyone wants to just share, have some input. Tara May, yes, I called you Tara May.
Tara turned around like, who?
Um, and we do have another mental health professional on. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to the conversation. Um,
You're on mute, by the way.
I mean, she pretty much said everything. Like you got to identify what your triggers are and try to work through those and just I guess just like being comfortable, learning how to be comfortable with who you are despite who you've been told you are your entire life. And learning how to reframe that and re-identify yourself
Yeah,
based on who you are now and not who you were then.
Yeah,
that's
that's
good.
good.
Hmm.
thank
Mhm.
you. Thank you. Anyone else want to share or have a question?
I have a comment. Can y'all hear me? Because I'm multitasking. Can you hear
Yes.
Yes.
me? Okay. First of all, I enjoyed it thoroughly. A lot of it sounds like me, and so I identify quite a bit with it. And I love Elaine and Christina as they talked about the spiritual piece too, because I find with me at this time in my life, it's an issue of stewardship. So it's even more than what I've normally fought with myself about. Now it's the idea of it being a requirement of the Lord. Like He wants us to be better stewards for the purpose that He's given us to do. So it can be heavy trying to navigate that into it feels more of a like a weight. Because it's not just, oh, I want to look a certain way like it was when I was younger, and then get older. Now it's like, okay, I want my health to be okay, and then you get to the point where it's like, okay, the Lord commands this because He has a work for me to do, and I want to do that work and feel good doing it. So what you all said was helpful to me. It was a lot of it was enlightening, and I feel it can be done. I know me and my friend Bernadette, who I think is on the line, we always say it can be done by the power of the Holy Spirit, but it's a fight, it's a journey. So, but
Yeah.
I appreciate y'all being so transparent and sharing your heart and your story, your professionalism with me. I feel like I'm walking away better than I came in. So thank you.
Thank
No,
you.
you
And
too.
Sherry, to piggyback off what you said, God has given us all an assignment to do, and we need a healthy body to do it, or we're not going to be able to get it done.
Yeah.
One of the things, I used to be a cigarette smoker, then I was a vaping nicotine. I got to a point in my life where I felt like, after God told me that I'm a writer and speaker, and I cringed and was like, Lord, not me. Um, But I
Right.
realized, how am I going to get up there and speak on any stage if I can't even breathe? So
Hmm.
I had to,
Yeah.
start to work on myself and my own health, and realize that whatever God has called me to do, I can't do it without a healthy body.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Then somebody else going to be doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And then, mm-mm.
Yeah.
If y'all know me,
That's
I'm
the
determined.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
that's that weight that I was talking about. It's like
hmm
another layer of, and because and I know because you guys do a lot of things for the Lord, and you just have that desire in your heart to please Him so much, and then I feel like too when He starts to reveal His purpose, even though I know I went kicking and screaming just like you, Christina, kicking and screaming, but once you start really walking in that purpose and you just love it because it's designed for you, you want to do it that much more to be the better steward. So it's a heavier weight, but again, I know it can be done. It's just a fight. It really is a fight. So I
yeah.
appreciate you. Yeah,
And it is a heavier weight, but also, I keep in mind to try to give myself the grace, the mercy, the forgiveness, the
yeah,
compassion, empathy, all of those things like God gives to me, to give that to
Yeah,
myself.
yeah.
Give that,
Got
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. Well, thanks so much, ladies. I appreciate you all doing this. I appreciate everyone that joined.
Thank
We
you for having me.
I'm going to give two plugs really quick. We do have a walk on Saturday, Acting Up and Yet Staying. It's a mental health walk, Stroll for Soul. It's a very casual walk. It's just more about connection and moving our body. It'll only be about 2 miles over at Elm Springs Park. We're going to start at 9:30. Christina, you mentioned mindfulness. We're starting at 9:30 with a little morning mindfulness, and then we'll go into
Okay.
the walk. So wear your green. If you don't have green, come anyway. Wear whatever you like, whatever you
Yeah.
have. Join us.
Okay.
And if you're looking for encouragement on your wellness journey and you want a supportive group of ladies, you can find us Challenge to Wellness on Facebook. We do different challenges, 30-day challenges, walking challenges. This month we're posting our food. We're eating foods like the dark chocolate and berries, foods that are good for our mood. And we're posting those in the group. And it's just a form of encouragement and a form of accountability. So if you're interested and need a little support on your journey, come join us. Again, Challenge to Wellness on Facebook. Thank you again, Elaine and Christina. I appreciate you both.
Oh, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Appreciate you as well.
Yes.
And good night, ladies. And don't go eat the cake. Go water.
Or eat
Don't
just a
say it. Don't
sliver.
even say the word. Don't say the word.
Eat a
No.
sliver, y'all. Just a sliver, okay?
Thanks again.
Thank you. Good
Good
night.
night.
Bye.